Coyote hanging on a barbed wire fence.
Lyrics that tell stories of love, loss, horses, and grit on Country Gold with Steve Harmon.
Our guest is an American actor. May know him from Casino, Any Given Sunday, Oppenheimer, but he's best known as the beloved yet misunderstood U.S. Navy sailor in the TV show Streets of San Francisco. Please welcome James Woods.
I don't know how many people ever saw that episode. Thanks, Steve. Great to be on the show.
May I tell everybody how we met real quick? It's a quick story.
It's so funny you said that because I was about to say,
Go ahead.
I had done Mike Rowe's podcast, and I love him because, he talks about vocational jobs and how important they are.
Yeah.
And we're talking, and all of a sudden I look on my X thing, and I see this thing from you, and I knew about you. Hey, you're talking to him. Why aren't you talking to me? And I thought, well, why aren't you inviting me on? DM'd you, and you gave me the number. We made a time, and here we are.
So James writes the Tombstone Opera album. All the lyrics. Shooter Jennings is the producer. Bob Wayne from Nashville is singing and bringing in some music.
We're having such a great time.
But I'll tell you what intrigued me. I saw the cover, which I would love for you to say, what is that? Where did you find that picture for the cover of Tombstone Opera?
Well, I'm so glad you asked.
I happen to have been to the OK Corral a bunch of times, and I thought, I've never thought about taking a musical kind of look at Tombstone, and that's where I thought I was going when I first put it on.
Right. Well, so here's the thing.
Yeah.
We were standing talking. We're in the studio, and Shooter said, by the way, what are you going to call the album? I don't know where it came from. I literally didn't even think about it. I said, Tombstone Opera. Everybody, all the guys went, and oh, man, that's fantastic. I love that. And we just went with it. Now, it's not set in Tombstone, and it's not an opera.
That's right.
It has an opera style. And Tombstone is just the classic. And there's I think I love this song called Nowhere Hill. And it's at the end when our hero is standing over the grave, maybe, of the woman he loved, or maybe it's she and he's singing her words. We don't know. It's very mystical. That's the whole idea. It has this neo-noir flavor to it. And the town is called Nowhere Town, and the graveyard on the hill is called Nowhere Hill. And the whole idea, I got inspired by my friend, say this because we're great golf buddies, played golf together for years, Clint Eastwood, in his Pale Rider, where he walks into the town and paints it red and it's hell, and the idea is that there's everything in this story is mystical. There's even a line where I say, diamonds fall from the sky. In two of the songs, I reference diamonds falling from the sky. And the idea for people who love to try to piece it together was that it was the Pleiades meteor shower. But we know when in Time for the Gun, when he's getting ready to go to fight the villains, that it's the same time as when they burn his ranch to the ground. In his mind, he keeps seeing that image because that told him that this terror was coming, or this terror on the plane. And it was so much fun because when we wrote the whole album, Beyond the Door was not written yet. And Bob said, what do you think? Are we done? Do we have it? And I said, I got to write one more song. It's got to be the big climax. It's got to be, fire and people being killed by the bad guys and them galloping across the plane. And I said, let me write it tonight. And and Bob
I'll
said,
get back to you tomorrow.
and I wrote that night, but Bob said, I'm going to walk outside and I'm going to just standing right beyond the door. And I said, that's the title of the song. And the big lyric in it is beyond the door, beyond the pale, beyond the door, beyond the veil. You asked about the cover.
Yes. Is that AI?
No.
Oh.
No, we never. Here's the cardinal rule for my label, which I created to do all these albums, is authentic.
Oh, good.
There's no AI. There's no auto-tuning. It's musicians writing songs and singing songs and playing instruments, and that's what it is.
Hear, hear.
Okay. This is real country, man.
That's good. Yes,
I got country royalty there. I got Shooter Jennings, man. I'm not going to betray, Jesse Coulter and Waylon Jennings, that heritage. We're not doing that.
Right.
We don't do that here in this neck of the woods. But my beloved wife, Sarah Miller, is a fantastic photographer. She's at Millerita on Instagram. And she had this picture. The actual picture was taken up in Red Rock Canyon, and it was in daylight. And she massaged it in Photoshop to turn it into a night, because there's a thing where sitting on a star hung high in the sky, there's this angel watching the carnage in the story. There's a spirit, knows the killing is nigh, and so on. Knows the carnage is nigh and the killing begins. And it goes. I'm bumbling through my own lyrics that I wrote. Anyway, so the idea
Who
of
better?
the idea of the star of the sky, and Shooter was saying this. Oh, I love this. He said, "Hey, when you do the graphics, which Alice Mall does, she's our graphic designer. Instead of putting the O in there, do the graphics around the star there and have that be the O." And that's how we did it. We do everything together. We're, the three guys do it. We're the Three Musketeers, and Sarah, with all the photography in the booklets on the back of the album. And there's a shot she got of Bob walking out the back door, which is beyond the door. So everything pieces together. And while we're talking about this, it's so important.
What's that?
Johnny Phillips has a distribution company called Selecto Hits, and they're fantastic. They're for little labels like us who can, get out there, and he has a way of making sure they're distributed. And the lady who runs the digital stuff is named Melissa Query, Missy Query. I talk to her every day, and she has helped me understand how to, without doing advertising, without being on the road, without doing anything, how to let the world kind of know that our music exists, because we believe if they hear it, they'll want to buy it and own it forever. And that has, thank God, been the case. We've had tremendous success with that. Missy Query, we have a credit on there. Thank you, Missy Query, for just everything. And she is the be-all and end-all, the alpha and omega of this effort, man. And Johnny Phillips, who of course is the great nephew, great nephew of Sam Phillips, of course, legendary Sam Phillips.
Yep.
So there's a lot of royalty sniffing around here, and then this guy from New England. And this guy from New England writing country music.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Bob again, because he did a song. He went out onto his deck and sang a song in the snow. They got covered, And he said, "Hey, what songs off of Tombstone Opera do you want to hear me perform live next tour?" And I reached out to him, and of course he responded. And I said, "Look, I have an idea that I ran by him, and I'll run it by you. What about doing the Tombstone Opera start to finish, every song live at, say, Billy Bob's Texas with some special guests? Perhaps you could figure out a way to get involved with, and you can record it there live. They'll record the whole thing. And then you have the actual song start to finish, which I always love. I know a lot of bands do that, but I think it's a cool idea."
I'm just like, let me send a limo for you to thank you, and then send you back with a bouquet of flowers. I think it's a phenomenal idea. I do know he's going, and this is important. It's one of the things I'm most proud of with this album. I mean, it's hard to get in the black financially when you create music, unless you're signed with a big label. And let me tell you, both these albums were signed with a big label. They wouldn't have sold 2 records, and that would have been the end of it.
I don't think I would have heard of it. I really don't.
You never would have heard of it.
No,
and
I get 100 songs a week. I don't see how I would have found it.
But Shooter says, man, the way you're doing it, it's like it's an unstoppable force of nature, because it's real music. And everybody says on X, and they always say to me, "Oh, country music like it used to be. Thank you, that kind of thing," which I love hearing.
Yeah.
And
although I should tell everybody, you made me have to look up neo noir, because I was like, well, what the hell country music is that? I don't know that one.
Can I tell you something? Shooter said it, and I said to Bob, "What the hell is he talking about? I know what neo-noir is in movies, but, how is this neo-noir?" He goes, "I don't know. He said, let's just make the songs and tell them, hey, is it neo-noir? Because we were thinking of that." So I just got to tell Shooter that basically we don't know what the hell you're talking about. But wait a minute. You got to hear the best part of this.
Yeah.
I said to Bob, "Gee, it's so great that you guys said, let's do this Western album and so on." And Bob turned to Shooter and said, "Should we tell him?" And I said, "Tell me what?" He said, "Well, when Shooter said to you, we kind of want to start with like Marty Robbins, classic country, and then we're going to add this neo-noir." He said, "That was an album that we wrote."
Oh.
I said, "I'm confused." He said, "You heard him say, we want to do an album, and you started writing this, so we thought, geez, these songs are good, so we didn't stop you. You wrote an entire album without realizing that's not, we weren't going to do that, and we like your album better, so they never did that album."
Oh my God!
Oh my God!
You also caught me when I first saw Tombstone Opera. See, when you were talking about, what's the Hill song again? Noir Hill.
Nowhere Hill.
Nowhere
Yes,
Hill. So I just looking at the notes, I thought, oh, they must be singing about Boot Hill. So,
But it is the Boot Hill. It's the Boot Hill of that town.
it's
exactly.
Oh, I see. Okay, that makes sense. Very good.
It's
Very
Nowhere Town, and up on a ridge above is a place called Nowhere Hill. It's mystical, but you want the audience to do just what you did, Steve. I mean, look, I'm a country music specialist because that's your focus. But anybody who loves country music in general, they start to piece it together.
good.
You know, oh, I get it. Wait a minute. So this guy's going into town. He's living life by the gun. Meets a beautiful woman. Met a good woman. I don't know how. You know, my attitude was he was a guy who maybe was a bit of a desperado himself. It was after the Civil War. We have a song about the Civil War in it, but it's not alluded to specifically, called Walk Up From the Water, which has a very Ennio Morricone, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Bob, when Bob wrote it, the lyrics were so complex. I said, Bob, you're never going to be able to do this in song version. Next day, I think I got it. And boom, there it is. And I think it's a magnificent piece of music on his part. I mean, look, I think Bob Wayne, here's the interesting thing. If we were at a studio, they'd be going, well, you got this guy, Bob Wayne, he does trucker music.
Yeah, he's a big truck guy. Yeah.
Great trucker guy. I said, great. I said, you know, people have second acts in their lives. What the hell does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing both parts here, even though badly. And I said, well, sir, what it means is that maybe Bob has some other gifts to offer us that, you know, have never been revealed because people want to hear the same thing. Hey, woo, woo, trucker. Fine. But, you know, that means he's going to spend the rest of his life going to Europe, where he was just 2 months ago, going to Argentina, where he was last month, you know, working in a 200-seat venue in a bar, people throwing beer bottles, going woo-woo and all this stuff. And he's a musical genius who's completely ignored for what he really has to offer. And I got to tell you, I love this guy. He's writing extraordinary music for lyrics that he's very deeply moved by, that to him are really special. And we're doing something special. And I think, you know, there would be a push to say, well, you know, you can get rid of Bob and you can get, you know, Chris Stapleton, a great country. I'm going to use an example of a great country voice.
Okay.
And I say, yeah, but don't forget, Bob also writes the music. And Bob's voice is fantastic. Bob just hasn't been discovered yet. So let me just say, if I can ever do anything with my music, with the lyrics I write, I want people to understand how brilliant Shooter Jennings and Bob Wayne and my beautiful wife, Sarah, how each of them really is, how as a group they are, what creative, unbelievably great creative artists they are. And if I can be responsible for that, I'd be happier than that than getting an Oscar from a business that fired me because they didn't like the way I voted.
Wow. Was there help from Shooter? Or did you just, when you sat down, you knew, oh, I like doing this, I can do this? Because it's not everybody that can do it. We have friends listening right now that are great songwriters.
Okay, this is going to seem obnoxious. I have nothing left to lose. Oh. I've been at the top of the pinnacle. I've been nominated for 2 Academy Awards. I've won 4 or 5, I don't even know how many, Emmys, you know, Golden Globe, all that stuff. Okay, I know what it's like to walk the red carpet. I know what it's like when a script is really good. I can tell you, I never read a script that I didn't know within 3 paragraphs that it was going to be great. Oh. I'm telling you, you can just tell. When Shooter said, write the lyrics, write lyrics, I sat down and the first words I wrote were, when the sun in early morning dies in sorrow and quietly fades, before they once more own us, before the world invades, before the sun burns away our sins, misty morning, don't let the cold world come back in. And when I looked back and read it again, I thought, this is what I was born to do, and I never looked back.
Oh, man.
And I've talked to other people, and they said, how long did it take you to write that? I said, I'm not going to lie, I wrote that song in 20 minutes. And I never changed a word.
Well, you know, that's a really big deal. We talk to songwriters all the time. And Pam Tillis, we talked to a couple of weeks ago, and she says she has a superpower. She can pick a great song, not just a good song. Like your superpower is you knew immediately if a script was good. But the other part is they say some songs will take you literally 15 minutes and some will take a month. But the ones that are 15 minutes are probably the ones from your heart.
Right. No, what? No, that's not necessarily true. Sometimes you can just miss. Because, look, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
let's pick one of the great modern songwriters, Paul Simon.
Okay.
Paul Simon is. I saw him once on a Dick Cavett show. He said, "Yeah, it takes her like I'd write like a line, and then a month later, I'd finally get the next line perfect, and so on." And I mean, sounds of silence, bridge over trouble. How do you beat that writing? It's the greatest writing you could ever imagine, and he took a long time to do it. I've had some songs that I've started to write, and I'll revisit them later. Songs that Shooter said, "Nah, it's just not for me," and then we end up doing it. And Shooter, oh God, I love this song. Yeah, you didn't, but it just didn't hit him at the time. And then all of a sudden life changes a little bit, and all of a sudden it does hit you. And by the way, I've written songs that get halfway through and I go, "This stinks. It's so terrible." I mean, so when I say it, it hits. Here's the one thing I do know.
What's that?
I've talked to a lot of writers.
Yeah.
Both novelists, screenwriters, songwriters. And I said, "Did that ever happen to you where it just wrote itself?" And they go, "Yeah, the first one always writes itself." And you go, "Wow, I can do this." It's the second one that's a killer. Because
that's great.
And I was really worried about Tombstone Opera being a failed sophomore endeavor.
The sophomore jinx, yeah.
But I feel it's actually, if you don't care who you please, I feel personally, Tombstone Opera is a perfect album. I would never change a word. But somebody else might say, "Okay, not my cup of tea." And they could be right too. So I'm not saying, "Oh, I'm a genius." I'm just really happy with the two albums we wrote, that I wrote. When I say wrote, the words.
Right, the lyrics.
Because the lyrics, I'm flawlessly, perfectly happy about personally. And I'm happy that other people, many feel the same way, which is great. And
like
I've had
me.
a couple of say, well, thank you. But I've had a couple of my very closest friends go, "It doesn't work for me." And, I get it.
Well,
It's
that's music in general. That's the way it goes.
Yeah. But I can tell right away when I hear music. I'll give you an example of music that wouldn't ordinarily be my cup of tea. And I mentioned this somewhere before. I want to back up on it. I have a friend. She's now in her 80s. She's the widow of Sammy Cahn, who won seven Academy Awards and 20. One of the great songwriters, lyricists of all time. And she said, "Make sure that everything rhymes and you have the right cadence and so on." And I went, "Okay, well, I can do that." And I'm telling you, she said that. I stopped writing for 7 months. I couldn't get that. And finally I said, "Oh, screw that. I'm just going to write what I write." And then I started writing it again. And I'll give you an example. I learned something from Oliver Stone. Oliver always allowed me to improvise a lot. Now, he's a great writer. He's won, I think, 2 Academy Awards just for screenwriting, as well as, another one for directing and so on. And he loved my ad-libbing a lot. It's a lot of his movies that I'm in, Salvador, Any Given Sunday, Nixon, many of the things that I said were my own ad-lib in the context of what he'd written. And I thought, man, if a guy this great, if a writer this great is willing to take input from another artist he's collaborating with, an actor, whatever, that's something I want to follow. So like Shooter sometimes would rearrange, like he'd say, "I really like this verse. I want to use it as a chorus, like repeat it." And I go, "Yeah, whatever. You're really the music producer. I do all the business stuff."
Yeah.
Although now I've come up with ideas, and I say, "Shooter, do you mind?" On the first album, you were sort of timid. He said, "Now you're kind of He said, "You've never come up with a single idea musically that I have rejected, and I've liked everyone, and we've used everyone." So that's probably just good luck. But I'll listen and listen. I usually let him do everything. All of the I said to Bob, "Okay, I wrote the lyrics, you wrote the music. Now we got to go into the Shooter sphere and see what we come up with."
The Shooter sphere, that's great.
The Shooter sphere, we call it the Shooter sphere, We give it to Shooter, and I mean, you give it to that band, it's just shocking how talented they are. They come up and they just, John Schreffler, Jamie Douglas, Russell, Ted Russell Camp. I always want to say that. Ted Russell Camp, Aubrey Richmond. They come up with. They're just so brilliant. Justo plays. Oh, and by the way, the Waters, did the vocal, the overdubs. The vocal background on "Hear the Thunder Crack." and they were just fantastic to work with. A great gospel group. I always want to mention them. And Aubrey did all of that angelic choral work in Tombstone. She did as an overdub. She came in after we'd done the album. She's going to be with us this time, thank God, because I love having her there. Yeah, and I've actually written a duet for Bob and for Aubrey. I don't know if you know Aubrey Richmond. Man, is she an unbelievable violinist.
But it's funny you mentioned the duet part, because the last time I talked to Shooter, he's working on his dad's 50th album. It'll be his, because he's doing a great job with it. And I said, well, look, I'm not putting any pressure on you, but I'm expecting you and your dad to do one of your songs together. Take one of his songs, add you, and have at it. I said, it's got nothing to do with making money. You guys don't care about that. But wouldn't it be the most awesome thing to have Waylon and Shooter on one song?
He played me the original tracks, and I said, God.
You're lucky.
And I said, Shooter, I lost my dad when I was 12, God rest his soul. And it was, it was a defining moment in my life that defined everything I did in my life. And from that moment forward, and I said, I found a letter of my father's that, unfortunately, a really evil woman burned on her way out the door. Anyway, it's another story. But I might write a song about that.
Yeah, of course.
As you leave, I'm going to call it As You Leave. Anyway, so I said,
now that's country right there.
Yeah, as you leave, don't trip on the steps. Anyway. But if God's willing, you'll make it down but get hit by a truck. Mother, I played a trucker song. I can get Bob Wayne to do the music. No, I'm kidding. I take it back. I don't wish evil on anybody. But that was a pretty mean thing to do. I got to tell you, it was my father's.
That's awful.
My father's last letter to me from the hospital. That's pretty evil.
Yeah,
I don't think it gets worse than that. But anyway. I said, what was it like to hear your father sing these songs? And I mean, Songbird itself, that beautiful song.
I love that, how he did that. Yeah, he did a great job with that.
Yeah. And by the way, Shooter was very careful not to over mix it. I mean, the original tracks were really solid. I mean, they were right in, but you don't realize it. I said, boy, that guy on the guitar is pretty good. He goes, yeah, it's Glenn Campbell. So, oh my God, I who was that?
Wow.
And these weren't like basement tapes. These were done, in the studio. These people working on an album.
Yeah.
But I mean, to discover that stuff, he's not a fame whore. I'll tell you that. He's just the opposite. He doesn't want to. Do press or publicity. He just wants to create music, and he is, I think, arguably the best producer now of music, and certainly country music alive today. I mean, he's just astonishing to work with, and the people he's been working with lately. And I never want to say, because he might say, "Hey, we want to break that news later."
Right.
You don't want to. And so, did I mention that?
Now for me, I'd love it if you do, but you shouldn't.
And one of the reasons I don't talk to him much before we work is because I like to have his fresh input into things. Bob and I'll say, I'll tell Shooter we'd like to do this. And I said, but Bob, don't say a word to Shooter when you get in the studio, and don't and stop me if you see me start to, because man, when that guy, he's like you just open that door of that corral. Just run as hard as you can, horse, and come on back when you're done. And just let him run, and just let that Mustang run, man. And he's got that fire of creativity, and he'll do stuff. I mean, he went up to John once with the lap steel on one of the songs, and John's doing this stuff, and I said to Bob, what is he doing? It was so insane. And then it was that magnificent sort of Beyond the Door, which is my favorite song of the album, where he says, in the distance of vision, and all of a sudden this insane sort of fever dream music starts playing, and it sounds like an entire orchestra. So these four people just making music, and it's
genius level, really. If you want me to
it's genius.
It really is.
You still came in when we did Hollywood Kills Everything. I said to Shooter, it's missing something, right? He goes, yeah. And I said, it's like a saxophone would be great, right? He goes, exactly what I was thinking. I said, because it's like Baker Street. It has that kind of feel to it,
Oh, yeah,
Hollywood Kills Everything. You still came into the studio And we were doing the final mix. And he said, "Hey, he said, yeah, he said, he's got an hour." I said, "Great." We played, he had never heard the song. We played the song for him one time.
Mhm.
And he said, "Okay, play it again." Plays it. He does the whole thing. And I look at Shooter and I said, "That's it." And he goes, "That's it. Thanks." And he left. And it was like literally uncanny. And it was scary, actually. It was like kind of supernatural. It was like, Jesus, who was that guy? I mean, he just dropped in. He was great. I said, "Where do you come up with these musicians? Are so amazing. They were just amazing."
James Woods, what an absolute pleasure. It's called Tombstone Opera, but there's a lot more to it, and you can read up on it, buy vinyl, find out how to get the album. You want to give the website? Because I know it's tricky.
Because there's a car dealership. The poor guy probably gets into it, and it's the same name, but he has a space. It's James Woods, all lowercase, no space, and make sure that your computer doesn't reset it with a space in between. JamesWoods.com, all lowercase, no space.
James will catch up with you again for the next James Woods Shooter Jennings project.